The key felt heavy in my pocket during dinner. I'd been carrying it around for 2 weeks, ever since I found it taped to the back of James's desk drawer, wrapped in yellowed paper. My husband of 35 years had never mentioned it, never given any indication that he kept secrets. But then again, death has a way of revealing things we never expected to find. "Mom, you've barely touched your food," Kate, my oldest, said gently. She'd been watching me like a hawk since the funeral, probably worried I'd fall apart at any moment. "The ham turned out perfect this year." "It's good," I'd assured her, though everything had tasted like cardboard since James died. Just not very hungry. Around the table, our family tried to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Kate's husband, Tom, was carving more ham for their teenagers who were more interested in their phones than family dinner. My middle child, Daniel, had brought his new girlfriend, who kept trying to fill the awkward silences with nervous chatter about her job in real estate. Only my youngest, Sarah, seemed as disconnected as I felt. She'd been pushing food around her plate for the past 20 minutes, her usual vibrant energy notably absent. When I'd hugged her earlier, she'd held on a bit too long, as if she were carrying something heavy. Before dessert, I said, reaching into my pocket, "I wanted to ask if anyone recognizes this." The brass key gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as I placed it on the table. It was old-fashioned, the kind you might use for an antique chest or vintage lockbox. Nothing special, really, except for the way James had hidden it. The clatter of Sarah's fork hitting her plate made everyone jump. Her face had gone pale, hands trembling slightly as she stared at the key. "Sarah?" Kate frowned at her sister's reaction. "What's wrong?" "Where?" Sarah's voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "Where did you find that?" "In Dad's desk drawer. It was taped to the back, wrapped in paper." I watched my youngest daughter carefully. "You know what it opens, don't you?" The table had gone completely silent. Even the teenagers had put down their phones, sensing the sudden tension. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "Dad made me promise," she whispered. "He made me swear I'd never tell you about it." "Tell me about what?" My heart was pounding now. "Sarah, what did your father hide from me?" "Not here," she said, looking around at our family. "Please, Mom, can we talk privately?" Kate started to protest. She'd always been protective of both me and Sarah, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Of course. Let's go to the study." James's study had been my refuge since his death. Everything was exactly as he left it. His reading glasses still perched on top of half-finished crossword puzzles, his favorite pen still caught in the spine of his weathered journal. The room smelled like him, a mixture of pipe tobacco, though he'd quit smoking years ago, and the peppermint candies he always kept in his desk. Sarah closed the door behind us, then sank into the leather armchair James had loved. She looked so small suddenly, reminding me of the little girl who used to climb into her father's lap while he worked. "I was 16, she began, twisting her hands in her lap. "You and Kate were visiting Aunt Marion after her surgery. Dad and I were supposed to join you that weekend, but I had a dance recital." I remembered that weekend, 14 years ago, when Sarah was still in high school and Kate was pregnant with her first child. James had insisted on staying behind to watch Sarah's performance. After the recital, Sarah continued, Dad seemed different, distracted. He took me to that little ice cream place we loved, the one that closed down years ago, and he told me he needed my help with something important. She paused, looking around the study as if seeing ghosts. He drove us to a storage facility on the other side of town. Used that key to open one of the units. Inside was. Mom, there was so much stuff. Photos, letters, documents. A whole life I never knew about. What do you mean, a whole life? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Dad had a brother, Sarah said quietly. A twin brother named John. They were separated as babies when their parents divorced. Dad grew up here with Grandma, and John went to California with their father. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's impossible. James was an only child. His father died when he was a baby. Sarah shook her head. That's what Grandma told him. But his father didn't die. He just took John and left. Dad found out the truth when Grandma was dying. She finally confessed everything, gave him some old photos. He spent years trying to find John after that. And did he find him? I couldn't quite process what I was hearing. How could I not have known this about my own husband? Yes. Sarah's voice cracked again. That weekend, when you were at Aunt Marion's, Dad got a call. John had died in a car accident in San Francisco. The storage unit. It was everything John's wife sent him after the funeral. Photos of their childhood before the separation. Letters their father had written to John over the years. Even some of Dad's school pictures their father had somehow gotten. I sat heavily in James's desk chair, trying to make sense of it all. Why didn't he tell me? He said. Sarah wiped at her eyes. He said it hurt too much. Finding out his whole life was built on lies. Discovering he had a brother, only to lose him immediately. It broke something in him. He didn't want you to see him like that. So he made you carry this secret instead? You were just a child. He needed someone to know, she said simply. Someone to help him sort through everything, to understand who he really was. We spent months going through the storage unit on weekends when I didn't have dance practice. He'd tell me stories about what he imagined growing up with a brother would have been like. I thought about all those weekends, how I'd been so pleased that Sarah and James were spending daddy-daughter time together. How had I not noticed the weight they were carrying? The key, I said, pulling it from my pocket again. Why keep it hidden all these years if John is gone? Because there's more in that storage unit now. Letters Dad wrote, but never sent to John's wife and children. His own journals about discovering the truth. And Sarah hesitated. You have nieces and nephews in California, Mom. Dad's brother had 3 kids. He kept track of them on social media, watched them grow up from a distance. He wanted to reach out so many times, but he was afraid. Afraid of what? Of destroying their lives like his life had been destroyed. They grew up thinking their father was an only child, just like Dad did. He didn't want to make them question everything they thought they knew about their family. I stared at the key, this small piece of metal that had unlocked such an enormous secret. Will you take me there? To the storage unit? Sarah nodded. I've been waiting for you to find that key, Dad told me. At the end, when he knew he was running out of time, he said I should help you understand if you ever discovered it. He said you deserved to know the whole truth, even if he wasn't brave enough to tell you himself. Did Kate and Daniel know? No one knew except me and Dad. It was our secret Sunday project, going through John's things, researching the family history, trying to understand why Grandma would separate twin boys and lie about it their whole lives. I thought about James, carrying this burden all those years. How many times had he wanted to tell me? How many nights had he lain awake beside me, thinking about the brother he'd never really known? There's something else, Sarah said softly. In the storage unit, there's a letter for you. Dad wrote it the day he found out about John's death. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should make sure you got it. When can we go? I asked, suddenly desperate to read my husband's words, to understand this hidden piece of him. Now, Sarah suggested. Everyone's still having dessert. We could slip out, drive over there. It's only 15 minutes away. I nodded, gripping the key tightly. Let me just tell Kate we're running an errand. Mom? Sarah caught my hand as I stood. Are you angry? At Dad? Or at me? I looked at my youngest daughter, seeing now why she'd always seemed to carry a sadness similar to James's. They'd shared this weight for so long. No, sweetheart. I'm sad that your father felt he couldn't share this with me, and I'm sorry he put such a heavy burden on you when you were so young. But mostly, I'm grateful that he had you to help him through it. Sarah hugged me then, fierce and tight like she had earlier. He loved you so much, she whispered. He was just afraid of losing you like he lost everyone else. He never would have lost me, I said, realizing as I said it how true it was. Not over this, not over anything. As we walked back to the dining room, I could hear Kate telling one of her famous stories, everyone laughing at the familiar punchlines. Normal family sounds, normal family moments. But now I knew that family was more complicated than any of us had imagined. Somewhere in California, I had nieces and nephews who shared James's blood, who had never known their father had a twin. I had a sister-in-law I'd never met, who had packed up her husband's childhood memories and sent them across the country to a brother he'd never known. And in a storage unit 15 minutes away, my husband's hidden life waited to be discovered. The storage facility looked exactly like every other storage facility in America. Rows of identical orange doors, gravel pathways, security cameras blinking at every corner. But Unit 247 might as well have been a portal to another dimension, one where my husband's life had taken a completely different path. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she took the key from me. I haven't been here since before Dad got sick, she admitted. I couldn't. It felt wrong coming without him. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet afternoon. Sarah pulled up the rolling door, revealing a space that looked more like a carefully curated museum than a storage unit. Shelves lined the walls, each holding labeled boxes and photo albums. A small desk and chair sat in one corner, with a reading lamp and what looked like a journal open on its surface. This was Dad's research station, Sarah explained, gesturing to the desk. He'd spend hours here, organizing everything, writing in his journals. Sometimes he'd just sit and look at John's photos. I stepped inside, overwhelmed by this physical manifestation of James's secret life. The first shelf held photo albums labeled by year, starting from 1955, the year James and John were born. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the earliest album. The first page showed two identical baby boys in matching christening gowns. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, someone had written, James and John, 3 months old. They were identical, I whispered, tracing the babies' faces. Perfectly identical. That's why Grandma dressed them differently after the separation, Sarah said, pointing to later photos. She always put Dad in blue, while their father dressed John in green. I think they were afraid the boys would somehow recognize each other if they ever crossed paths. The thought made my heart ache. How could a mother do that? Separate her own babies? From what Dad learned, it was spite more than anything else. Their father had an affair, and Grandma wanted to hurt him as deeply as he'd hurt her. Taking one of his sons was her revenge. I flipped through more photos, watching two identical boys grow up separately, their lives diverging, but their faces remaining mirror images. James in his Little League uniform in Ohio, John on a beach in California. School photos that could have been of the same boy, except for the different colored shirts. Their father sent these to Grandma, Sarah explained, pointing to John's photos. He'd mail them every few months, begging her to let the boys meet. She kept them all, but never showed them to Dad. He found them in her attic after she died. And that's when he started searching for John. Sarah nodded. It took him almost 2 years to track him down. John was a high school principal in San Francisco. He had 3 kids, twin girls who were in college, and a son in high school. Dad found his work email and drafted probably 100 messages, but he never sent them. Why not? Fear, mostly. What do you say to the twin brother you never knew you had? How do you explain that your mother kept you apart out of spite? By then, John and Dad were in their 50s. They'd lived entire lives without each other. I reached the last photo album, dated just 14 years ago. The first page showed a newspaper obituary. John Marshall, beloved educator and father, dies in tragic accident. 2 weeks, Sarah said softly. Dad found him and lost him in 2 weeks. He finally got the courage to send an email, but instead of a response, he got a call from John's wife. John had been hit by a drunk driver on his way home from work. Did she know about James? No. But when Dad told her who he was, she broke down crying. Apparently, John had been looking for him too. They found drafts of emails on his computer after he died. Dozens of them, just like Dad's, all unsent. I sat in James's chair, trying to absorb the tragedy of it all. 2 brothers, both searching for each other, both too afraid to make the first move until it was too late. The letter, I said suddenly. You mentioned a letter for me. Sarah moved to a smaller shelf near the desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in James's familiar handwriting, the letter slightly shaky as if he'd been emotional while writing it. Do you want me to give you some privacy? Sarah asked. I shook my head. Stay, please. With careful fingers, I opened the envelope. Marie answered on the 3rd ring. Sarah had put the phone on speaker, and I heard a warm voice say, Hello, Mrs. Marshall? This is Sarah Bennett. I'm not sure if you remember, but about 14 years ago, James's daughter, Marie interrupted softly. Of course I remember. I've thought about your family often over the years. Sarah squeezed my hand as she continued. I'm here with my mother, Elizabeth. We recently found Dad's storage unit, the one with all of John's things. There was a long pause on the other end. When Marie spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I always wondered what happened to those boxes I sent. James never reached out again after that first call. He wanted to, I found myself saying. He didn't know how. Neither did I, Marie admitted. How do you build a bridge across decades of silence? Maybe we start now, I suggested, one plank at a time. We spent the next hour sitting on the floor of the storage unit, talking to Marie on speakerphone. She told us about John's last days, how he finally worked up the courage to email James, but kept finding reasons to wait. They were so alike, she said, even without knowing each other. Both afraid of disrupting lives, both protecting everyone but themselves. She told us about their children, Amy and Emma, the twins now both elementary school teachers like their father had been, and David, who'd followed his uncle's footsteps without knowing it and become an engineer. The kids know about James now, Marie revealed. After John died, I found all his research, all the draft emails. I told them they had an uncle, but by then he was looking for them too. Sarah finished quietly. Would they? I hesitated, then pushed forward. Would they want to meet us? Not right away, but maybe? They've been asking about you for years, Marie said, especially after they had their own children. They want to know their cousins, understand their family history. Sarah pulled out her phone again, scrolling through photos. Kate has 3 teenagers, and Daniel just got engaged. We could share pictures, start getting to know each other that way. I'd like that, Marie said. And maybe, when you're ready, you could come visit, or we could come to you. The girls have been talking about a family reunion ever since I told them about James. The idea of a reunion made my heart race with both anxiety and hope. We'd need to tell Kate and Daniel first, I said. They don't know any of this yet. Of course, Marie agreed. Take all the time you need. We've waited 14 years. We can wait a little longer to do this right. After we hung up, Sarah and I sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the physical evidence of our expanded family. You know what I keep thinking about, Sarah said finally. All those times, Dad would say he felt like something was missing, like there was a piece of himself he couldn't quite find. He was feeling John's absence without even knowing it. I nodded, remembering James's occasional melancholy, the way he'd sometimes stare off into the distance, as if looking for something just out of reach. Twin bonds are powerful, even when broken. Kate's going to be angry, Sarah said, voicing my own concern. That I knew, and never told her. She'll understand once we explain. Your father put you in an impossible position. I looked at my youngest daughter, seeing now the weight she'd carried all these years. You can share that burden now. Let us help you carry it. We spent the next few hours going through the unit, organizing what we'd take home to show Kate and Daniel, photos of their uncle and cousins, letters that revealed the depth of John's search for his brother, newspaper clippings about both men's achievements, parallel lives that should have intersected. In one box, we found a collection of baseball cards that made Sarah gasp. Dad and John collected the same teams, the same players, without ever knowing. Look, they both kept their Mickey Mantle cards in plastic sleeves with the same blue backing. These small coincidences felt like physical proof of their connection. 2 brothers separated by circumstance, but linked by invisible threads of shared DNA and similar souls. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the storage unit's door, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Where are you guys? Everyone's worried. Ready to do this? I asked, gathering the most important photos and letters. Sarah nodded, but her face was anxious. What if they don't understand? What if this tears our family apart instead of making it bigger? Then we'll deal with it together, I said firmly. No more secrets. No more carrying burdens alone. That's what tore the brothers apart. Everyone trying to protect everyone else instead of just being honest. We locked up the unit, but not before I took one last look at James's research station, the desk where he'd spent countless hours trying to understand his own history, the chair where he'd sat writing letters he never sent, the lamp that had illuminated his journey of discovery. We'll be back. I promised the ghost of my husband that seemed to linger there. We'll finish what you started. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in thoughts of how to explain everything to the family waiting at my house. But as we pulled into the driveway, Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Dad would be proud of us, she said softly, for being braver than he could be. Inside, Kate and Daniel were waiting in the living room. their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Kate started to ask where we'd been, but something in our expressions stopped her. "Mom," Daniel said quietly, "what's going on?" I sat down on the couch, the envelope of photos heavy in my lap. "There's something you need to know about your father," I began, "about our family." Sarah sat beside me, her strength flowing into me through our still-clasped hands. Together, we began to tell the story of two brothers, a mother's spite, and the chance we now had to heal a decades-old wound. 3 months later, I stood in the San Francisco International Airport, watching Sarah point out familiar faces in the crowd, faces she'd only seen in photos but somehow knew instantly. "There they are," she whispered, squeezing my hand. Amy and Emma, John's twin daughters, looked so much like their father that my heart skipped a beat. They had his height, his way of moving, the same features I'd fallen in love with in James. David, their younger brother, was carrying a toddler who could have been Sarah's daughter, the family resemblance that strong. Marie reached us first, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. "Elizabeth," she breathed. Finally, Kate and Daniel hung back slightly, still processing everything they'd learned. The initial shock and anger had given way to curiosity and cautious excitement, but I knew they were nervous about this meeting. "Uncle James's smile," Amy said softly, touching her own lips as she looked at my children. "We have the same smile." The ice broken. Everyone began talking at once. Emma's twins, now 4, immediately attached themselves to Kate's teenagers, while Daniel and David discovered they'd attended rival engineering schools. The coincidences kept piling up. Shared interests, similar career paths, even the same unusual hobby of collecting vintage maps. "Mom," Sarah said later that evening, as we all gathered at Marie's house for dinner, "look at this." She held out a photo album she'd found on Marie's bookshelf. Inside was a picture of John at his high school graduation, wearing the exact same tie James had worn to his, a tie their father had bought 2 of, sending one to each son through different channels, never knowing if they'd receive them. "He kept everything too," Marie explained, joining us. "Every scrap of information about James he could find. Newspaper clippings when your engineering firm won awards, announcements about the kids' achievements. He followed your lives from afar, just like James did with us." Around the dining room table, our blended family shared stories, filling in the gaps of lost years. Kate and Amy discovered they'd both gone into teaching because of their father's influence. Daniel and David had both played second base in high school, wearing the same number without knowing its significance in their shared history. "I wish they could see this," Marie said quietly, watching our children connect. Both of them wanted this so badly, but were too afraid to reach for it. "They can see it," I replied, thinking of James's letter, "is hope that we find our way here." They brought us together, even if it took longer than it should have. After dinner, Sarah and her cousins spread out old photos on the floor, creating a timeline of parallel lives. "Look," Emma pointed out, "Dad and Uncle James both wore Superman costumes for Halloween in 1962. Different coasts, same choice. And they both named their dogs Rex." David added, "What are the odds?" The evening stretched into night, none of us wanting to break the spell of newfound connection. Marie brought out John's journals, showing us entries that mirrored James's own writings, the same questions about identity, the same longing for the brother he'd never known. "We're having Thanksgiving at our house this year," Kate announced suddenly. "All of us. No more separate holidays." "2," Emmy agreed. "We've missed too many already." Looking around the room at these people who were both strangers and family, I felt James's presence strongly. He would have loved this, the laughter, the stories, the healing of old wounds. Sarah caught my eye across the room and smiled, tears shining in her eyes. She'd carried this secret for so long, watching her father struggle with the weight of loss and missed opportunities. Now she could finally share that burden, could watch as our family expanded to include the connections James had yearned for. To the Marshall brothers, Marie raised her glass later that night, who never stopped looking for each other, and who led us all home in the end. To family, I added, lost and found. As we clinked glasses, I thought about the storage unit back home, still holding its treasure trove of memories. We'd bring Marie and her children there someday. Let them see James's side of their shared story. But for now, this was enough. This gathering of souls who should have known each other all along, finally finding their way to each other. Later, as I fell asleep in Marie's guest room, I dreamed of two little boys in matching christening gowns, their futures stretching out before them like parallel rivers finally flowing back together. In my dream, they were laughing, sharing a secret joke that only twins could understand. "Thank you," I whispered to James's memory, "for leaving us the key to unlock this door." Somewhere, I hoped, two brothers were smiling, watching their families become one at last.